From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
I bet you wonder why I called you here today.
You've got a tip for Melissa, a new fact on an old case, a troubling question you've never heard the answer to, how to get your vegan cousin to stop sending you holiday tofurkey recipes. Tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And now here's your host. This year it's Hallmark and Lifetime with the 24-hour Christmas movies, and she's gone mad with indecision, Melissa Morgan.
Mark Halbell. How dare you, sir? I am not at all indecisive.
Well...
The ones on Lifetime are much worse.
Yeah, but you're indecisive about which ones you're watching.
That is true. All right. I will confess to that.
I go in there and it's like, I go into the bedroom where Melissa does a lot of her...
Where I'm sequestered.
She sequesters herself. She does notes. She's got her little iPad there and she's doing research. And I look in and it's always the same thing. There's some handsome guy, some very attractive young lady, and they're in a town that looks exactly the same. Every town at Christmas time in these worlds looks exactly the same. Everybody decorates for Christmas. I mean,
they have $1 million.
If you go into the head of the gas station, the men's room of the gas station
smells like pine.
It smells like pine. It's woody. It's got a Christmas tree in it. It's got
a Christmas tree in it.
It's got a little Christmas tree in it. It's got
Just don't open the presents under the tree because
no.
It's probably just a bunch of urinal cake.
Yeah. It's practical. No, but it's just
holiday urinal pie.
It's always the story's always pretty much the same version. It's one of two things, right?
Oh, here we go.
It's one of two things.
Here we go.
That this couple that doesn't like each other. It always starts with a couple that doesn't like each other. That's
right.
on every movie the same.
Right.
They don't like it. So the couple that doesn't like each other finds themselves in a situation where
they're at odds.
Well, no, but they're in a strange town, and the old man who's like the sage of the town there's something mysterious about him. It turns out that he's really Santa Claus. That's one. That's a
good one.
It's
about 12 of them.
Yeah, about 12 of those. The other one is the couple who doesn't like each other. It's
either a florist or a bakery.
Florist or bakery. One of them, usually it's the woman, but sometimes it's the man.
Mostly the woman.
Florist or a bakery, and a developer's coming into town to destroy.
An evil developer.
From New York. The other member of the couple is from New York.
Probably.
Yeah.
Mostly New York.
Yeah, New York, maybe Chicago, maybe L.A.
Mostly, you're right. I think it's mostly New York. And
New York.
they actually show up with bulldozers gassed up.
Yeah,
and they're going to plow through the oldest tree known to man in the town square. Yeah. My favorite was the benches that the bakery owner's grandfather had carved with his arthritic hands. In the town square, they were going to tear those fuckers down.
I hadn't heard that one.
Oh, that was a good one. My all-time favorite, though, was, and producer Mark did not believe me. He was sequestered in his office at the other end of the hallway, and I was in our master bedroom. And he's correct. I was probably sitting up in bed with my little awesome bed desk and my little iPad and looking at murder scenes. And then... to cleanse my palate.
Dead bodies right in front of her on a little screen.
Yes.
And on the big TV screen at the other end of the room, you got this stuff.
Mm-hmm. To cleanse my palate, I'm watching one of them, and Mark is in his office, and I said, "Well, evil developer, I just want you to know that someone showed up in Santa's workshop, and he's test driving the sleigh. I guess he's like blowing the dirt off the carburetors or whatever, the dust off the top of the carbs." So he's getting the sleigh ready he's getting it travel worthy. And one of the elves comes up with a clipboard and says, could you sign this, Mr. Christopher Crinkle Claus Holiday? And he's like, what is this? And she's like, sleigh insurance. So I text producer Mark and say, I just want you to know the risk manager for Santa Christopher Crinkle Claus just offered him a clipboard and a form to sign off on sleigh insurance. And Mark says, bullshit. That's the entire response. And
I really couldn't believe that.
I rewind it and pause it and record it and send him a 30-second video of an elf.
And there it is.
A risk management elf.
Yeah.
Offering Santa a clipboard.
And Santa says, you can never be too safe.
You can never be too safe. Exactly. That's what he says.
I would love to be Santa's risk manager.
Wouldn't you?
I have to tell you, most of my in-house clients do not have that attitude about insurance.
I bet.
Their first question always is,
why?
How much is it?
Right. This is a lot of money. Why am I doing this? Get out of my face. Yeah. What if you wore an elf suit?
Oh, I'll try it.
Okay.
I think I would probably disturb more people than it would really kind of get on their good side.
I just was so, so entranced by the magic of risk management involving Santa Claus's travels. So I have a new love, and her name is Tip-Ster Brandy. And she found the podcast through her husband, Tip-Ster John, who is the impetus for this week's episode, our wonderful interview with Detective Kelly Best, the cold case detective, homicide detective from Cincinnati. And Tip-Ster Brandy, I guess, maybe drug her feet a little bit until Tip-Ster John was like, just fucking listen. And now she listens on her way to work and her way home. She has a commute, and she has, quite a backlog of episodes to listen to. We have like 106 now. But here's where Tip-Ster Brandy won my heart. She said, after hearing you, fucking talk about Mountain Dew Kickstart Black Cherry for the 87 millionth time, I stopped and got one, and you're fucking right. But what she said was even better. She said, it's like sex in my mouth. And
whoa.
Yeah, this is how I know if she weren't married and I weren't married, I would ask for her hand in marriage, because describing my beloved nectar of the gods as sex in your mouth, Tip-Ster Brandy, I don't know why you are not like a marketing and ad exec, like at McMahon and Tate or something, because I would use sex in my mouth if I were PepsiCo and say, this is why you need to drink Mountain Dew Kickstart Black Cherry.
That not to put too fine a point on it, but sex in my mouth kind of sounds like the plot of Deep Throat.
Oh, yeah. I guess you're right. It isn't the most chaste, but I just thought it was a beautiful description. She sings my soul. I'm just going to say that Tip-Ster Brandy sings my soul.
Another reason why I love you.
You're weird. And we want to thank, her name is 88621. I hope she's not a robot. But she, and I say she because I have no idea what her gender is, or his gender is. But number 88621 left a lovely review on Apple Podcasts about the podcast, and we're really grateful because there's a couple of shitty ones and they just bring down everything. So if you have a moment and you would like to give us a 5-star rating, we'd be thrilled. If you would like to sit down and take a few moments and write a review, we'd be more thrilled. And those things are more important than we can tell you, because that's how people find us, especially an independent podcast where we are doing this on our own. We don't have a network. We use crowdsourcing as much as I think law enforcement should use crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is my new favorite thing. And if you are in the crowd and you have the time and ability to leave a rating or review, we'd be really grateful. If you have a story you want us to cover, please feel free to call us at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. You can email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. And we love hearing from our tipsters because they're smarter and more informed than we can ever be. And they know of cases and find cases that are so fantastic. We have a little bit of a backlog trying to get to all of them. But thank you for sending them in.
We'd rather have too many than not enough.
Absolutely. Tipster Amy and her mother have sent in one from Indiana that's really, really interesting. I can't wait to get my claws into that one. And this episode, again, courtesy of Tip-Ster John, a Cincinnati native, is really a fascinating one. It's a 50-year-old cold case. The 50th anniversary was October 23rd of this year, 2019. So it was the evening of October 22nd through the morning of October 23rd of 1969. And even as many things that have changed in that time, things stay the same. It's so interesting looking back 50 years, way before a lot of the tipsters were even thought of. And to know life was kind of the same, and yet it's so very different. But the thing that doesn't change are the humans, the human element. And the detective that got the case first sounds like a stellar human being, and the detective that's handling it now is a stellar human being. It's Detective Kelly Best. And we have her information, which she mentions at the end of the episode. We will make sure it's in the show notes. If you are a Cincinnati native and you have any information on this plaguing 50-year-old cold case, the Dumler-Wilson family murders, if you accidentally heard somebody say something you think might be of use, don't think anything's too small. I am a firm believer that there is someone, or more than someone, there are someones who know something. And if you do, please call the Crime Stoppers number that Detective Best mentions, her email address, which she gives you, our number, our email address. You know, I mentioned to her that just this past week, a 15-year-old cold case was brought up and a suspect arrested because someone left a tip on a Facebook page. So crowd sharing is really so much more important than I think we give it credit for. When I say it takes a village, that's not something I made up, but boy, have I glommed onto that, and boy, does it ring true to me. I don't think there's anything in life that is you can do singularly that, maybe can't be done better with help or with a friend or with a family member. Or I'm very enthused by things like crowdsourcing. And Detective Best is a wonderful cold case detective with a great life and great service to all of us around her. And she is really worthy of getting some help with this case. So if you know something, I hope you will let her know, let us know, let someone know. And you're, I think, going to really enjoy this interview with Detective Best. So we're really blessed today to have Detective Kelly Best as our guest on Just the Tipsters, because she is a phenomenal homicide detective in Cincinnati, Ohio, and she was gifted this 50-year-old cold case of the Dumler and Wilson family murders. Welcome to Just the Tipsters, Kelly. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, and I have even more respect for what you do after getting the disc with the case file on it, because I've had it for about 10 days and my eyes are crossing. It's mammoth. It might not be the biggest case file that you have seen, but maybe because of the amount of years that the case has been unsolved, it's gathered like a rock going down a hill, picking up some extra mud and branches. It's huge. It's a huge boulder at this point. It is fascinating. And I want to say a special shout out to John, Tipster John, who sent me this case. And I thought, the 50th anniversary is coming up soon. This is a great time to take another look at this. And then I got to go back home in northern Kentucky, and I thought, I'm going to see if I can find someone who will talk to me. And sometimes you strike out when you call a police agency and ask if you can speak to someone about a case. But I feel like the gods were shining on me that day, because I called, and I guess since I moved away, Cincinnati's sort of the law enforcement agency is separated into different districts or zones or something. So Districts. Okay. So I called the one I thought District 4 or something that I thought would be in charge of the case, because it was in Mount Lookout. And I got a hold of a very nice officer who said, the cold case detective I have on duty today is Detective Kelly Best, but she's gone. I'm going to put you through to her voicemail. So I left you a message and then was up late, like 5:30 in the morning, the following morning in my hotel, looking at notes and about to, again, my eyes are going to cross. And at 8:20, I get a phone call back from Detective Best, who's like, "Hi, I was looking for Melissa Morgan." And I'm like, "Yes." And I like to think that I answer the phone and I sound like I've been up for hours, but you are such a good detective. You're like, "Did I wake you?" And I was like, "Well, no, I was up, but I was not really coherent." And you're like, "I'm like, it's kind of early." And you're like, "Early? I get up at 0400. And I'm like, "Oh, shit. Who am I talking to right now?"
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's like reprimanding me because it's 8:30 in the morning, and how have I not gotten up and run 5 miles and solved the Mideast crisis? It's 8:30.
I don't think I did that to
You did. Oh no, it was implied. I got all of it. I got all of it from what you said. But yeah, I was like, she gets up at 0400. I'm going to kill myself. So, and I consider myself an early riser, but I don't get up at 0400 unless I have to take someone to the airport or something. I don't. So you get up at 0400, which is, frightening. So I'm going to guess that means you're former military?
Yes, I'm a Marine.
Of course you are. You are a Marine. There's no such thing as an ex-Marine. So you are a Marine.
Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you so
awesome.
much for your service. So how did you get into law enforcement?
Well, I you don't want to say you kind of fell into it. It was just kind of my life path, I feel like. I was in the Marine Corps for a long time, actually. And I think the jobs that I held prior to being a policeman were sort of in that sort of way. Also, I worked in loss prevention for Macy's way back in the day when it was Lazarus, and also did some loss prevention for Lowe's, and then I became a policeman. So it's kind of been, I guess, what I've maybe not always wanted to do, but once I joined the police department, I had a pretty clear career path on where I wanted to end up, and here I am.
So I feel like that's where all good cops come from. I don't want to call it something in their DNA or something they're born with, but there's something that's been there for a long time, obviously, and it's a specific gift, and it's most of us are really grateful in society for people like you who have that sort of mindset. So every police agency is different as far as I know about when or how you become a detective. Mm-hmm. But are you specifically a homicide detective, or are you major crimes, or how is it classified in Cincy?
Specifically homicide.
Okay.
So before I joined the homicide unit, I worked in a unit called personal crimes, and that unit focuses on or investigates sex crimes and crimes against children.
Got it.
So I was there for 10 years. Prior to that, I was in patrol for about 5.5 years. And then I've been in homicide for about 2.5 now at this point. So
do you get routinely handed cold cases, or are you just so busy that you get every now and then one or two?
I do just cold cases.
Okay. And that I didn't know. So when I spoke to the officer, he said the cold case detective I have now is on duty. Okay. So you do specifically only cold cases. That's amazing. I love that. I wasn't sure if Cincinnati had a specific cold case department, but that's great that you handle only cold cases. So this case is, like I said, brought up to me by a listener in Cincinnati. And the other cold case that is routinely brought up to me is the Bricka family murders, which we covered. Mm-hmm. We covered last year in 2018 because 2 listeners would not stop hounding me about that case. And hindsight's 20/20 when you look at a very old case. So that's like 53 years old, coming 54, 1966. So it was 3 years before the Dumler family case. So oddly similar, some similarities. Understood that probably not in one iota related, but or for this same reason. But I feel like the Bricka family murders was more of a personal.
Yeah.
And the Dumler family is a little more scattershot, I'll just say that, than the Bricka family murders. But it's fascinating that people sometimes draw a parallel because they're both older, unsolved, triple homicides in a person's home. Mm-hmm. I was really fascinated reading that. I feel really blessed to have grown up in Northern Kentucky. And there's obviously, everything's a double-edged sword. But the Cincinnati police have in my mind, a really storied kind of history. And one of the things that fascinated the shit out of me was from 1968 to 1980, there were 837 murders in Cincinnati, and all of them but 71 of them were solved. I mean, I think the Cincinnati police force is pretty fascinating. And I know it's gone through changes and some hits more recently with some racial issues, but I still think it's such a great, solid police force to work for. I'm hoping you feel that way too.
I feel tremendously lucky to work for the Cincinnati Police Department. When I joined the police department, actually, my mom was not a huge fan of me joining, not Cincinnati specifically, but a large police department. She wanted me to join a suburban police department, and I did not want to be a policeman for any other department but my city. Wow. And I feel like I am one of the best trained policemen in the country, and I'm so proud to work for the police department that I do. I love Cincinnati, and I love being a Cincinnati cop.
That's the most beautiful thing ever, and that's what I love hearing, because it not that I needed any faith restored, but it makes me feel a lot better hearing you say that. You want people to be happy doing what they do, and when it's something as important as what you do, you really want someone to be happy. So when I was looking back at the history of the Cincinnati Police Department, I was sort of overwhelmed and with pride of coming from that area. And I will tell you this before we get into the more of the details of the Dumler case. The original responding detective was Detective Paul Morgan, and I love that we have the same last name.
That is cool. I didn't even make that connection. That's so funny.
And the more I read about him, I fell a little bit in love with him, and I wish I was related to him. I wish he was like my dad or something, but he sounds like such a fucking cool dude. I mean, from the time and from everything he says, he is, just like smart, like street smart, but also this amazing philosophy that applies 50 years later. So he, I'm sure most detectives have that theory. If there's a homicide, and the reason most of them, fingers crossed, get solved is that the perpetrator is someone known to the victim. So Detective Morgan, in an interview with Cincinnati Magazine, said, I was taught by my mentors, start close. Yeah. But then he said something, it was about 15 years after he was being interviewed, about 15 years after the Dumler-Wilson murders. And he said, at this point, what we need, and this was the most beautiful term, we need the spoken word. And I just love that. He equates, we need the spoken word. At this point, we need someone to come forward and tell us something. We need someone to speak to us. And I was like, he sounds like a poet. So I know the case was, handled the best it could in 1969. I will also tell you the details. I was blown away by the details because I didn't think a lot of the items that were collected, the evidence collected, and the tests that were run were even available in 69.
Yeah, they did a ton of work. And I haven't even, had time to go through everything. But there's a lot that was done. I didn't realize in 1969 they would check the drain traps for blood. Right.
In 1969. It just seemed, maybe it's, growing up in a generation where you get most of your information from forensic files, where you think nobody did any investigation before 1980. It's like in 1969, they're collecting the drain traps, and the only blood they found was of the victims. Everything they did was fascinating to me. The fact that there were 20 polygraph exams administered.
Yep.
I mean, so before I get into the details, which I just, rub my hands together, I'm like, this is so fascinating. So we'll start at the beginning. So October 22nd of 1969, sometime after, let's say 8:30, 9 p.m. and sometime before 8:30 in the morning of the 23rd, bad things happened on Beverly Hills Drive in Mount Lookout. The next morning, the maid came to work. And at about the same time, the Dumler children, Martin III was 5 and Jane was 4, they had gone next door in their pajamas to their neighbor and said, we can't wake up Mommy and Daddy. And about that time, the maid had come to work and come in and was running, had gone and found the scene and was running to the neighbors and said, thank God the kids slept through it. So it was said that the Dumler children were heavy sleepers. A lot of kids are heavy sleepers. I grew up in Kentucky and we didn't have air conditioning until I was 6. And when I was 3, sometime in the summer, sleeping with the windows open, we lived on a corner lot. A guy came home from a bar and was drunk and drove through our yard and hit the tree right below my window. There were, fire trucks and ambulances and sirens, and everyone's out, and Melissa slept through the whole thing. So, kids, I get it. Kids can sleep through a lot of things, and potentially the perps used pillows and even a pair of Martin III's pants to shoot through as silencers. Again, pretty interesting. It makes me think somebody who may know what they're doing. This isn't like a rage killing where someone gets angry and turns around and hits someone with a fireplace poker. It's bizarrely planned and bizarrely chaotic in my mind. Mm-hmm. It really is. So the bedroom door was locked so that the kids didn't find their parents. I don't know if that was done out of concern for the kids or if the kids were even thought of. But the victims are the parents, Martin and Patricia Dumler. Martin's 29, Patricia's 27. And Patricia's mother, who's visiting because Patricia's father had a heart attack and was in the hospital. So Patricia's mother, Mary Wilson, who's 50, I think she's just collateral damage because she happened to be visiting. And she was only shot through the head. So it feels like, as if that's not enough, but it feels like that, the parents, Martin and Patricia, were oddly targeted. And I don't know what it says to you because I don't have that training, but someone who shoots and stabs someone to death, do you think that, someone stabbed someone to torture them first? Or do you think it was just, we need to kill these two people and we'll do it in many ways so that there's no chance they'll survive?
Well, if you look at Patricia, she was stabbed after she was shot.
Interesting.
Because, and I can tell that because if you look at the notes that I sent you,
Mm-hmm.
Her cause of death was the gunshot wound, and right underneath where I wrote her cause of death was the gunshot wound, I wrote where I wrote her stab to the chest produced minimal hemorrhaging. She hardly bled.
So you stop bleeding when you're dead. So
dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Martin his cause of death was the stab wound.
And the gunshot wound was almost like a secondary thing.
Right.
So I could be way off track, but does it seem to you that Patricia was the target?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair answer because I don't know either. But to me,
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair answer because I don't know either. But to me,
definitely.
Yeah. I was going to say Patricia, was stabbed in the back and in the chest and then shot in the head. And Martin was stabbed in the chest and shot in the head. And Mary was shot in the head. To me, I don't know. It felt like Patricia was more of a focus, but I could just be misinterpreting or grabbing at straws. as I
Well,
want to do?
I think it's hard to tell because you definitely have at least 2 offenders.
At least, yeah, I would imagine.
Not more.
Which is another reason why I think the more people there are, the more chatter there's going to be. Somebody's going to talk and somebody has to know something.
Yeah, I mean, there was, as far as, the motive for this, there was some business things with Martin, with Patricia, with her background. I don't know enough about it at this point. I haven't had enough time to figure out.
Yeah, it is all, because I was going to ask, I mean, before this happens, Martin and Patricia are, they come from long, upstanding, storied families in the area. They both graduated University of Cincinnati. Martin is the third or fourth in line at his family's business, which I have to tell you, a business named Chatfield and Woods Sack Company. I don't know how you make all that money, but I guess there's good money in sacks. I don't, they made like bags for flour and cornmeal. I was like,
Right.
How is this a really...
Trying to get into like bags for ice, I think.
I think I read something. Yeah. I read
some
something
reading on that, but I don't think the business was going well.
Okay. I was, not to sound like, I'm the armchair detective, and I was like, I wonder if Martin was cooking the books, because there was, I know, I watched too much TV, but so yeah, and that his grandfather started as a kid in the late 1800s, and then by 1929 was the president, and then Martin's dad, and then Martin, and I'm sure he thought Martin the Third would be in the business too. But I was just wondering, how is this business so successful? They were members of the Cincinnati Country Club. It was like they were living their best lives. They traveled a lot. Patricia, graduated also from University of Cincinnati. I don't even know what her focus or studies were, but she had modeled for, and this is so sweet and indicative of the times of the 60s, she had modeled for a store called Lillian's Dress Company, or Lillian's Dresses. Mm-hmm. But the thing that struck me really hard was that 2 weeks before the murder, she was excited about getting a new gig at a place called the Fox and Crow, which was I called it a bar, but it was apparently a upscale fancy supper club, like really fancy, where they had, like singers and stuff. But I was fascinated by Fox and the Crow, and I look it up, and it's an Aesop fable, and it's hilarious and sad, and that a fox sees a crow pick up a piece of cheese, and he's like, I want that. So he follows the crow till she lands on a branch, and he comes up to her and says, Mistress Crow, I hear you have the most beautiful voice in the forest. Please sing me your favorite song so I can hear your dulcet tones. And of course, as she opens her mouth or her beak to sing, she drops the cheese. And the fox picks it up and says, thanks, that's all I really wanted. And let me give you a lesson. Never trust flatterers.
Oh, gosh.
I know. I was like, who names a bar after an Aesop fable? And why is Aesop so fucking much of a downer? Every one of his, cautionary tales are so awful. So here's this crow gets, her cheese stolen by a fox. I'm like, you fucker. So it's like, the Fox and the Crow bar, and she was very excited about getting a job modeling at this upscale nightclub, which had roots to the syndicate. It had been around. It was what I read. I thought I was going to die laughing, and yet it was so fascinating. The club had been around for 20 years at that point in 1969. It started in 1949. And at one point there was a raid by the Cincinnati police, and the person on stage, her name was like Kitty Callan. She never stopped singing as they busted in and raided the place.
Get out.
She never stopped singing. And then she said, I'd like to dedicate this next song to the Cincinnati police. And it was the song Mule Train. I'm like, I feel like I'm in a Twilight Zone episode.
Make that shit up.
You can't make that shit up. It is the truth. So Patricia,
I'm going to go pitch that to old man Warner down at the studio.
Well, we're all under contract with the studio anyway. So yeah. So, in 1969, she was going to be modeling at the Fox and the Crow. And if she paid attention, she would not trust flatterers. That's all I'm going to say about that. So,
Yeah, no kidding.
because it was, to me, all the things you rule out at first. No robbery, really nothing of value
Nothing.
taken. Yeah.
The rest of the house wasn't disturbed other than, the cords that were, that whole thing is weird. The cords that were cut off of the
That is
appliances in
fascinating.
the house that were used as ligatures.
That is fascinating. There's no rape,
Right.
no semen or no rape.
Of either woman.
Yes, exactly. So you brought up the cords. So let's talk about the implements of murder. So again, when I say it seemed very well planned, because like you said, it had to be at least 2, if not 3 people. It seemed orchestrated and planned and yet oddly chaotic. I don't know a lot about killers, hired killers, or, hitmen, but you come to a house, either the occupants know you because there was no forced entry. So you either come in through the front door like a guest, or you gained entrance some other way, potentially through the back door that was an odd little back door. You bring guns, your own guns, and yet you take the occupants' steak knives from the kitchen to cut, as you mentioned, cords from lamps, I think the TV, an electric shoe polisher, which I think also lets you know that they were living a high life in 1969. I've never even heard of an electric shoe polisher.
No, me neither.
Martin had an electric shoe polisher.
Oh yeah. They have them in men's rooms.
They do?
Yeah, in some of the fancier men's rooms, you can walk up and just stick your foot in it and shine your shoe.
Well, number one, I need to hang out in more. Yeah, I need to hang out in more men's rooms, and apparently, and I revert to my original statement because producer Mark said in fancy men's rooms. So to me, that's a fancy house. It's like if you have an electric shoe polisher, you've got some disposable income. So an electric shoe polisher, the broiler in the kitchen. I mean, we're talking about tying up 3 people here, wrists and ankles, and you know enough to bring your own weapons, I guess probably to secure them or get them all together in the bedroom. You take their steak knives and cut you can't stop at the fucking hardware store and buy rope. You got to cut their cords off of a lot of their appliances to tie up 3 people, wrists and ankles, with electrical cord. You kill them, you cut the cords off them, and you take the cords with you?
But why tie him up at all? There was some sort of conversation that was happening that you had to tie him up before you kill him. You had to, there was something happening in the house.
That's why I wondered about the stab wounds, but you blew my mind when you said that Patricia was stabbed after she was shot.
That's just my own...
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because you're not going to
process.
bleed. Yeah, you're not going to bleed if you're dead. And if there wasn't a lot of blood with the stab wounds, and she had more than everyone else, you were already dead. It makes perfect sense. So I don't know if someone, and obviously these are all questions we're not going to be able to answer, but we can have, theories. I thought that they were tied up and stabbed to get information, potentially financial information, or that's just a guess because of what was going on with Martin and the business and the whole thing. It just, I can't imagine why. Have you ever seen a case where a killers, plural, used implements around the person's house, but also brought their own implements to kill them? Is it rare?
I would think that that'd be unusual.
I think so too.
And it's just her chest stab wound. She was stabbed. I'm looking at Patricia. She was stabbed 3 times. She's got 2 in the back and the 1 in the chest.
Okay.
So her stab wounds to the back, I'm going along with your, when you were saying tied up, tortured, people are trying to get information. It makes perfect sense. Because Martin was also stabbed multiple times.
Twice in the chest.
Yep.
He was the only one that, he didn't have a stab wound in the back, but twice in the chest. And then Mary, I guess maybe it was just dispensed with.
I completely agree with you that she was collateral.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that I should be a detective? Is that what you're saying?
For sure. And you get to tote guns. It's awesome.
That's the only part I couldn't do. I'd need to be in the office. I don't like to go outdoors, and I don't want a gun. But other than that, I'd be a great detective. I would be the best detective ever. But so in another odd, in 1969, another odd thing in my mind, two of the only pieces of information that are similar in the Bricka murders and in the Dumler and Wilson murders, one palm print. Ironically, one palm print left at the Dumler home and one palm print left at the Bricka home. So strange. So I know I'm going to sound like a script from The Godfather. So you leave the knives, but you take the cords?
That is so weird to me. That the cords are taken.
It's like leave the gun and take the cannoli. I don't get.
Maybe one of their kids had an electrical project for science fair, and they needed the cord.
That's it. They were, you know what? They weren't even killing people. They were collecting electrical cord, and Martin got upset, and then they had to kill everyone because Martin wanted all of his cords to his lamps and his electric shoe polisher, especially. Very important. Very, very important. It's, to me, in 1969, to have the forethought to take the cords is someone who, this isn't their first rodeo? You think that's fair to say?
I do think that's fair to say, yeah.
That someone, they may have done this before, which if they've done it before, either they have a particular beef with the Dumler family, or they were sent by someone who does or did have a beef. So I did not know that the wonderful bag factory or sack factory wasn't doing well. So they were trying to break into different parts of the bag world, like bagging ice, because it wasn't, maybe they were having some financial issues.
I was starting to delve into that part of the case file, and if I remember correctly, it was they were looking at different types of machinery to manufacture different kinds of bags or something like that. Right, okay.
I did remember reading something about that, but I didn't understand that it may have been as a saving grace to try and save the company. I didn't understand that because they were living a pretty high life, you know. I mean, they were living their, they were living their best life. It wasn't like money was shooting out their buttholes, but I don't think they were hurting for anything.
And I don't know if that was current time, because I feel like Martin was he still a traveling salesman?
He did travel a lot. Yep.
No?
Yep. Nope. That's one of the statements from the neighbors who said, I saw him late that night. She thought she saw him around 8:30, between 8:30 and 9 on the 22nd. And she said that wasn't surprising when I saw it was dark. I just wanted to make sure I knew who it was out in the neighborhood. And I saw it was Martin. I recognized him. And he traveled so much with work. So he was still traveling. Yeah, she wasn't surprised that someone was coming home and he hadn't been traveling that day, but that he absolutely still traveled a lot for the business. One of Patricia's friends said she would call her on random weeknights or even a Friday night and say, "Do you want to play bridge?" And she knew she would pretty much always be available because of Martin's travel schedule. So yeah, he was traveling quite a bit. I wonder if business in other states may have bled over into Cincinnati, and maybe someone from another state or, another business could have been the perpetrators. And for what reason, I don't know. But I do know that when Martin left the office that day at like 12 or 12:30 or something, he said he had to one of his coworkers, a female coworker, he said, I have an important meeting with a man.
Yeah.
Well, it may not have been able to even be proved because it was, something he said to a coworker, and who knows if he was actually meeting someone or if that was a cover.
What was that lady's name?
I have
the one that said that.
I don't remember. It's in the file, and it was just a coworker, and she was being interviewed by the police, and several people actually either overheard it or just repeated what she said because it's mentioned several times. And I have to say,
she was his secretary, right?
Yes.
There was a whole file on her.
Okay.
Did you get that?
I don't. I saw a interview with her, but I don't know if I got all of it. And I have to say, what you sent me, what the lovely Bethany in your records department sent me, was so overwhelming. I literally thought my brain was going to fold in on itself. And I thought, if this is one case, I don't know how Detective Best does this. I mean, I don't know how.
Right.
So if law enforcement agencies are not open to crowdsourcing, I start to get a little defensive and I feel my butt slam shut, because obviously you don't want to give out information that would compromise a case. But a 50-year-old cold case, how much information are you going to give out that's going to compromise anything? None. And if
Right.
That's why I was so grateful at your, I basically said, would you come on and talk to me about this? And you go, yes. Like before I had I didn't even finish the sentence. And I was like, I already love her. And it has her focus on the important part, which is fucking getting it solved. Not about standing on some sort of ego, but on, look, if I don't care if it's some, crazy dude who talks to himself in the street, if he knows a piece of information and calls in or writes in, I'll take it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
for sure.
Exactly. I mean, it's very shocking to me when people are distrustful of Facebook pages or of podcasts, because nobody is trying to do something harmful. We're all trying to, work on the same cause, which is get cases solved and get people who've done bad things, get them, they need to, pay for what they did.
Well, that's an interesting thing. And I wanted to ask this, since you guys are talking about it, Detective, in this day and age where there is so much, there's so much available out there and in social media, and I include podcasts in that. Do you find that for someone who does what you do, that this is a tool that you're using more and more? Are you learning to trust it more? Are you open to it? It seems to me there's a whole lot more opportunity for law enforcement, even though I think if I were in law enforcement, I would find it a little overwhelming. So do you find that, do you appreciate that, or do you find it more of a hindrance?
Well, I'm absolutely overwhelmed currently, yes. You guys are my first podcast experience with any case. I've worked on, and I'm currently working on another really big cold case.
Oh, yes, you are.
Yeah. So I am overwhelmed with information and people contacting me about that case as well. But we use social media, not just myself for cold cases, but, law enforcement, we use social media all the time, and it's a huge help.
That's great to hear.
I have not had, I think I told you, Melissa, Missy, haha, your favorite.
I threatened her to not do that, and then she does it. Yeah, anyway.
Sorry. That I'm not super experienced with podcasts, and I'm figuring them out. My youngest kid loves them, so both my kids do. So I'm learning about podcasts, and I'm sure that hopefully I get, some contact about this case, because, man, wouldn't it be cool to solve it?
Wouldn't it?
Oh, God. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think Detective Best is one of the more open detectives in law enforcement that I've spoken to. I've been
absolutely.
I've been blessed to have a couple of really great experiences. I've had a couple of not so great ones too, but there really isn't like a gray area. It's, people are either withholding and distrustful and don't particularly want to be on a podcast, which is totally fine. Or people are open and understand the medium, as well as what producer Mark said, social media. And just to make it, a little bit of a shorter thing, crowdsourcing. I'm just going to call it crowdsourcing. And obviously, when a large group of people or even a small group of people come at you with information, you have to weed through and find the things that might apply or that might be interesting or that might be crackpots. So when I said if it's a guy walking around Cincinnati talking to himself on Fountain Square, but he has a piece of information that could be helpful, you don't have to, but it would be great if you listened to all of it and took it in. And I feel like Detective Best is one of those people that she is open to hearing, to hearing anything that anyone has to say, because you never know. I'll just be gross. You never know if you're picking through a turd when you might find a great piece of corn. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Thanks.
That's an excellent way to put it.
I'm a poet too. Yeah, it's not.
Gee, honey, what's for lunch?
I couldn't think of another way to put it. I'm sorry, but that's what I was like. You have to sometimes pick through the shit to find the corn, and then it's like, oh look, it's the corn.
Oh, there's the old needle in the haystack.
Oh, sorry, I could have said that.
That would have worked too.
I always have to go for the shit reference. You know me. I'm constantly in the shit reference. But it was all I could think of at the time. Thank you, Producer Mark, for being a much more classy version of what I was trying to say. But I know you have a lot of, things to go through. And as an example, in the case file, I found two tips that had called into like a Crime Stoppers number in 2002. And on the same day. So what I assumed happened, actually one person wrote, or whoever was taking the information down, said after the story on, I can't remember if it was WCPO or WKRC. I think it was WKRC. After the story ran on WKRC, this person called in saying their friend was married to a man who knew 3 people were killed, admitted to killing some people, and took the cords. Mm-hmm. So that's a piece of information that isn't known to everyone, or wasn't known to everyone. It's probably gotten out there now, but it wasn't something that was one of those things that I'm assuming you would keep back, because it is such an interesting piece of information. I mean, there's every homicide probably has information that is different or unique or fascinating, but this one has a lot that is really bizarre to me. Like I'm still, trying to find a motive, and obviously I don't know all the details. Could the motive be because of Patricia? Could there be some odd thing going on at the Fox and Crow? Could it be Martin with some shady business deals trying to keep the Sack company in business and maybe borrowing money or getting money from, the underworld?
I don't know.
It didn't seem like they were cutting back in any way. Like that, money
Not
was...
at first glance.
So back to, weaponry, and I know so little about guns, but...
Yeah.
So there was a Smith & Wesson revolver, a Colt Diamondback revolver, and something called a Colt officer model revolver. I don't know if that means police issue, but the other thing that I found strange, and maybe it's just like a cost-cutting thing, but the bullets were wad cutters. Yeah,
so they were like reloads.
Right, like cheaper versions of bullets, so that you say, and that's why I was like, is this a cost-cutting thing? Or they're often used for target practice.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
What I found fun, and I use that word loosely, was when I was going through, I was reading interviews from Martin's friends.
Yes.
And a bunch of his buddies had reloading equipment.
Yep. So you think it might actually even be closer when original responder Detective Morgan says, I was taught stay close. It may even be closer than we think. It may be associates or friends as opposed to a more outward, the syndicate.
I mean, maybe. And, I don't know if any of his friends, college friends or anything, have any association with any of that business aspect. I don't know.
Right. I don't either.
There was some sort of, I wonder if Patricia was pregnant when they got married.
Oh, no, that's interesting.
Because if you look back, and I don't know if I wrote any of this down, he had a long time girlfriend, like 5 years. What was her name? Sunny Peters. And then they broke up, and he married Patricia like a year later. And I wrote in my notes somewhere that was like a thorn in everybody's side for years.
Right.
The fact that him and Patricia got married.
Yeah, I did see that note.
And they got married so quickly after him and the other lady had broken up. And it was kind of like him and her breaking up was like they were a couple and all the other couples, you know, in their college years and everything. And then he hooks up with Patricia and it messed everything up with all the friends. So I don't know if
Interesting.
that was just another little theory I was throwing around. But then all of his buddies have all these reloading equipment, but most of them are shotgun reloads.
Okay.
So I didn't get as far to see if any of them are pistol reloading, if they have pistol reloading equipment, but a bunch of them have 38s. They were all big gun guys back
Yes, they were.
back then.
Martin had 2 guns in the house that were not used. I mean, you know, at least 2 that I saw. And I mean, yeah, you're right. I'd forgotten that in one of the interviews, a friend said...
They would have known that. That would be a good reason why they were bound. If he had guns in the house, I wonder where they were. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I don't think I realized.
He had 2 guns. They weren't out.
They were.
I don't know. That I don't know. But we know, you know, so there's no rape, there's no robbery. The women were both wearing expensive jewelry that was left on them. There was money left on the bureau, not a lot, but still cash out in front. So there was zero robbery motive, zero rape motive, at least, you know, at the beginning. There was one note from Detective Morgan that said there's evidence that whoever did this stayed in the house for a while. I don't know. He didn't elaborate, so I don't know how or why he came to that conclusion other than it happened overnight and whoever did it thought, you know, they had some time before they had to flee. And I don't know why they would have stayed there except maybe to talk to them or, as you say, torture them, you know, get them all together, get information that they wanted or needed. And then, I mean, because the theories and the motives are so widespread, I can't, like, my brain can't hold them all. And then, you know, it could just be something much more simple. You know, it is 20 polygraphs being administered in a murder case. Is that normal?
No.
I didn't think so, but I wasn't sure.
No. Polygraphs may have been used a lot more back then.
Right.
They may have relied on them more heavily back then. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I don't use them a ton myself.
Right. I understand we're talking about a time difference too. I mean, 50 years ago. But when I saw that 20 polygraph tests.
That is a lot.
I thought so too. And what was so interesting, and obviously, you know, it can be, you know, not admissible in court, but could, you know, lead someone to say something or feel pressured. All 20 polygraph tests were, you know, they came out positive that the person, you know, was not involved, except for 2 that were inconclusive, but yet more on the positive side. And one of the guys, everyone said, oh yeah, he's just really nervous.
Yeah.
He's a nervous guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is, I mean, even in 1969, I still think this is a very interesting piece of information that there were 20 people polygraphed and all of them came back, you know, they were coworkers and family members and neighbors and associates. And it seemed like no matter who or what, people were willing to be tested. Maybe they were more fearful in the past, like, oh, I better do this or I'm going to look guilty. But it was just so interesting to me that there were 20 polygraph tests, and then to see the results of them was even more interesting.
Yeah. That kind of throws the whole gun friends thing out the window.
It does.
Not really. I mean,
it does a little, but no, you're right. I mean, they were all the buddies, and there was a group of couples, you know, and old friends of his. I mean, because we're talking about people that are still pretty young, you know, 27 and 29. And the old school, the old boys school, you know, you go to college, you graduate, you go into business, you take over your family's business, you know, and you keep up, you know, relationships with people, whether it's for business reasons or friends, whether they were frat buddies. So they're still, I mean, these people are still pretty young when this happens, and they're still connected with those people. And like all of the men had guns, a lot of guns. Yeah. A lot of guns. And I there's so many details that are so interesting. The wad cutter bullets, taking of the cords, using the guns, but taking knives from their kitchen drawers. It does make my head spin because it feels orchestrated and yet not. And I can't, it's a mystery that will be poking me really hard, I'm sure, many, many nights as I'm not sleeping. But this is a fascinating case. Is there any other information or details you want any of the tipsters to know that, may help jog someone's memory?
Did you see in there a guy named Sam Crew?
No, I don't remember that name.
Okay. So you got the copy of the interviews of everybody, right?
I did.
Okay, so there's a guy named Sam Crew. He should be number 8.
Okay.
And he was friends with Martin. And he was in the middle of testifying in some sort of, this just struck me. He was testifying in some sort of federal trial on like a monopoly on concrete. It was some kind of business deal with. It had to do with the bag company and the and a concrete company.
Okay.
And I don't remember if Sam's family was in the concrete business, and it was something to do with the bags and concrete. And I just thought maybe that could be something related.
Okay,
so if
I'll
you
look at
haven't
that too.
looked at that,
Yeah,
I think maybe Martin was at Sam's house the night of the murder or the night before. I think he stopped over there, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think there was some time after 5 or 5:30 and before 8 or 8:30 where he was visiting with friends, and maybe Sam was the friend. I'll look that up. I just think that's, somebody knows something, and they may not. Here's the thing: they may not know they know it. And I'll tell you why I think absolutely more than one person knows something. Because when I was in Kentucky and in Cincinnati in September, my BFF, who's a little closet sleuth, went with me, and we drove around, and the Dumler house is almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's tidy, a lovely yard, a lovely quiet neighborhood. It's a cul-de-sac. I mean, there's so much, and it looks like there were probably 3 or 4 new-ish houses that were going up, but for the most part, it's a quiet, settled area in Mount Lookout. And I thought it was amazing that it's called Beverly Hills Drive. I love that. I thought that was adorable. There are woods behind it. It's somewhat secluded. The lots are a good size. I just feel like somebody knows something, whether somebody told them something offhandedly years ago.
Right, I think so too. And the thing is, it's so long ago now that the somebody who knows something might not even be in Cincinnati anymore, maybe listening to this podcast somewhere else.
Right.
So if somebody thinks they have any information, detective, what should they do?
They can call Crime Stoppers. That will be area code 513-352-3040.
And if they want to reach you directly?
My email, which is super long, but it is Kellyanne, it's KELLYANNE .best, my last name. That's B as in boy, EST. So it's Kellyanne.best at Cincinnati-OH.gov.
And we will put all of this in the show notes so that people can find it. We will put this on any link that we share on social media, which we use Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So people will have a way to get a hold of you or to get a hold of the Crime Stoppers if they want to leave an anonymous tip. Well, and we're called Just the Tip-Sters, not just because I'm a 12-year-old boy and it's a dick joke, but because we want people to call in tips. And we want people, and I was like, my heart skipped a beat when I found the 2 tips that were called in from 2002. I thought all the way up to 2002, when one of the local news stations runs the story again, people call in. And that gave me hope. That really gave me hope that there's still someone, who may be alive, who may not be alive, who, may have moved, as producer Mark said, but somebody who told somebody something, and those people are still alive, or they remember, you know what, that guy said something really weird, and it's always bothered me, and I wonder if it has to do with this. Or that woman told me something. I can't help but think, I can't help but know that there's someone still there or still within the sound of my voice that knows something about the Dumler-Wilson murders. So if there's anything else that you think of that you want us to put in, please let us know, Detective Bess. But we're really grateful that you were able to take the time today to talk to us. And before we let you go, I'm not putting any pressure on you, but the other case you mentioned, at some point I'm going to wear you down and you're going to talk to me about that one too.
Sure.
Because that one, it's definitely, it's more modern, and that one is pretty fascinating. And
It is.
And yeah, I can't wait to talk to you about maybe all your cold cases. Maybe you'll just be our guest every week and you won't have a choice. We'll just keep calling
Lord
you.
have mercy.
Thank you so much, Detective Bess, for being with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much, you guys.
We appreciate you. So we're really grateful that Detective Bess took time out of her day to talk to us about the case. And the Dumler case is really going to be one I'm going to be thinking about way too long. And I looked down at my wonderful true crime page-a-day calendar, and it's a quote from Sherlock Holmes from the book The Sign of the Four from 1890. So here's how things really don't change. Sherlock Holmes said, "How often have I said to you that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." So I know there's truth in there. I know that somebody or somebody's knows something. And I hope if that's you, you'll do the right thing. And more cowbell.
And remember, if you'd like to become a patron of the podcast, go to patreon.com/Just the Tipsters.